Mm.
Yeah, just bring a napkin so we can keep the napkins on that.
It'll be his first time really doing all the comics.
It's all good. I'm not worried about it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I'm not worried about it.
Looks like we still have 3 other books, so hold on just a second.
Picked up in a while, huh?
Can you kill the music for a second?
Yeah.
Anthony, have you read this one yet?
Okay.
You want me to come in for test too?
Yeah, sure. Now let's get that done.
It's a good idea to test stuff before we start.
Ideally, yes.
I need both Mike and.
But Mike is to speak with the handheld is to speak with her, and Mike is for ours.
Okay.
We'll get that sorted at some point.
No, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. Okay, am I on?
Yeah, I hear you. Testing sounds great. Sounds terrific.
Hi.
Hi, Robyn.
How's it going?
Good, good. Still waiting for a couple more kids to come. And
Okay, no worries.
Awesome.
thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for picking this book.
Yeah. We'll talk all about it.
Okay, great.
I always hate the before interview part because I don't want to ask stuff that I might ask during the interview.
Yeah.
So it always feels really awkward to me. Like, what do we talk about? How's the weather in New York?
It's not bad. It's a little chillier today, but it's fine.
Okay. Yeah, it's pretty cold here today.
Oh yeah.
But it's finally stopped raining, so that's good. California cold. It's true. It is. It says the Canadian. It is California cold. Very good. So, but anyway, I was just making sure that everything's working. So everything's working. Yay. I did get a copy of Voro.
Oh, great, good.
So, Voro.
Yeah, we decided on a title change there.
Yeah. Again, something I want to ask you about. Terrific.
Everything sounds good.
Great.
Confirmation from external sources.
Great. Fantastic. You guys like the book? Yeah. Cool. That's what I like to hear. That's what I like to hear. I didn't. It doesn't. It's not insane. I mean, Greg Rucka did write that, but I feel like it's more likely. You know where to take those dollar comics and put them on the TV and movie section that we set up right here at the front, like next to Watchmen or whatever, because that makes sense. Good morning, good morning. Come on in. Yeah, we haven't. You don't have to whisper yet. It's not whispering time. You want to sit in front with me? You want to sit up in front with me? Yeah, it's totally cool to sit up in front. And if you ask questions, then it's really easy just to turn to you too. That's kind of cool. Yeah. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, Rob. Sit back.
Yep. Yeah. Just if we get more kids, that I might ask the adults to. Yeah. You know how it works. Very good. Perfect. Kids get priority. Heck yeah. Heck yeah. It's filling in. Mm-hmm. The way it should be. All right. Nah, it will not be disruptive. We'll figure it out. Very good. Okay, so we're basically going to start. Yeah, as soon as Jordan gives me the okay here. sit down, will you? If you wouldn't mind. Yes, sir. You. Come on in. We're gonna start.
Okay.
We're about to start. Make sure I have the right book to hold up. Very good. I've got her. Yeah, no problems.
You're only going to see her.
Yeah. Well, I have a little teeny tiny one that I can see myself in. Yeah. Teeny tiny one.
All right. In 3, 2.
Good morning and welcome to the Comix Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club meeting for the month of December. Our book this month is Lily the Thief by, and I'm sure I'm gonna screw this one up, but I think it's Yane Kukonan. Is that right, Robyn?
It's Jan.
It's Jan. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm actually not sure how to pronounce his last name. It hasn't come up, but Kukonan.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Who knows? He's not here today, but we are joined by Robyn Chapman, who's the editor of the book. And this will be a very, very special graphic novel club because we've never talked to an editor yet. And I think, well, we'll ask questions about what does an editor do and things like that, because even I'm not 100% clear on it, I think, a lot of the times. And I'm sure most of you guys probably don't really know what an editor does, right? Yeah. Anyway, so the book, Lily the Thief. And so let's go to you, Robyn. Before we ask about editing, let's talk about your CV a little bit. How did you get into editing? What's your background?
Well, I really love comics. I discovered them a little later when I was a teenager, but back then manga was beginning to get big, and the Vertigo line was getting big with Sandman and comics like that, and it was great stuff for a teenager to be reading. And I fell in love with comics, and I always liked to write and draw. So, but I didn't know what I wanted to do with that. When I discovered comics, it was like a perfect combination of those two things. So initially, I went to art school because I wanted to make comics, and I still do as a hobby, really. But eventually, ended up working as an editor, where I help books get made and make the books the best they can be, and help artists have careers that hopefully can sustain them as much as possible. So rather than making the books themselves, I'm helping creators make the books. And yeah, so I did go to art school. So that's my background in comics, which is a little unusual for an editor. Like most editors have a degree, an English degree, or maybe a journalism degree, or a publishing certificate, or something like that. But I went to an art school with a comics program, and then I worked at another a comic book school in Vermont called the Center for Cartoon Studies. That's all they do, is they have a 2-year program in comics. And so I love comics. Comics are kind of my life. And I was lucky enough to find this career in editing because I think I'm pretty good at it. I think everything I learned by being a creator of comics and a lover of comics and a reader of comics makes me really good at helping other creators to craft the best comic they can. I understand how comics work, and how that visual storytelling, that sequential storytelling, the pacing, all the little things that go into a comic book. I've learned through going to school and working with some great teachers how those things work. And so yeah, I found there was an opening here at First Second, and I started first doing part-time entry-level editorial assistant work, and now I'm a senior associate editor at First Second, which is the graphic novel imprint at Macmillan Publishing.
Yeah, excellent. That was a long path right there. I like that. You mentioned that you're rare in that you have a background actually in comics, and it's really true. I mean, particularly at the big houses, it seems like most of the editors there are much more from prose and manuscripts. How early, when you typically work with an artist, how early are you starting to help steer, given that you've got a comics background?
Well, it's different for each book, but I'd say the typical path is that someone pitches us a graphic novel, and the pitch is when there's a creator, an author, either maybe an author-artist team, or it's one person who writes and draws it all together. But they have an idea for a comic, and they haven't made the comic yet. Like they probably like sketched out the characters and they've created an outline, and maybe they've even drawn a few sample pages, but the comic isn't done yet. So before they finish the comic, they're pitching the comic to a publisher to see if a publisher might acquire it. So the word acquire in this meaning, it's when a publishing house basically has a book deal with a creator. Says, we really like this book. We think that we can, make some money off this book. Usually you have to, do some profit and loss scenario and make sure that, like, what, we love this book, but we also think that it will be, it'll make a profit. Basically, you do all that homework and you convince your publisher, like, hey, let's acquire this book. Let's give this author a book deal and give the author some money so they can start working on this book. And once they have that book deal, then they start drawing it. So that's usually how it works, but not always. Like sometimes there's authors who, and when I use the word author, I usually mean like a creator making a comic. That could mean the person who's writing it, the person who's drawing it, a person who both writes and draws it. I just use the word author to mean all those things. So when so the graphic, trying to think back to where I lost my train of thought, but yeah, usually we get it at the beginning of the process where the author hasn't started to create it yet. And they get this book deal and they have a little money so they can focus on the project for a while. But that's not always the way it works. Sometimes an author is working independently, like maybe they're working in the small press and self-publishing it, making mini comics. Maybe they're putting online as a web comic. Maybe it's just something they're doing. It's on their own in weekends and evenings because it's a passion project. And maybe we get it when it's done or almost done. So that can happen too. So how we shape the book really depends on like the shape it is when we get it. Is it just an idea, or is it almost done? Is it completely done? And with Lily the Thief, this is another pathway to being published. So this book was completely done in Finland and published in Finland. And they were looking to get it published in other countries and other languages, which they've done very well. Like, we published it in America in English, but it's also been published in France, and I'm pretty sure there's a German and a Polish translation. So this is a very popular series in Europe. So it was already done.
I want to say that I actually got a copy of the original Polish here, Woro Kolman Kunikan R, I think. I think that's how you pronounce it. What's interesting, and I'm going to pass this copy around to you guys, is not only is it in Finnish, but it's also in black and white in the original, whereas this version is in color. So we can talk about that a little too. You guys take a look at it and then just pass it around. It's kind of neat to see it in a different language. Let's be a little broader on working with people. How do you know when you want to have an author, when you want to accept their book? Like, what is it about? Because certainly I imagine that you must be much like me owning a retail store where I see a lot of people bring me in stuff they want me to sell. And a really good amount of the time it's not there yet, right? So what's it, can you talk about this from your point of view as a prospective buyer of those books?
Sure. Like me and some of my colleagues here at First Second, other people who work in the editorial department, we were talking yesterday and we're trying to estimate like how many books are pitched to us, like how many creators come to us saying, hey, can you publish our book? And in a year, I think it might be around 400.
Right.
That's a lot of books. We certainly don't accept all of them. We accept a pretty small minority of the 400 submissions, pitches we get. And the ones we do accept, there's like a number of reasons. There's a lot of things to consider. But first, for me, like when I get a pitch, when I get a submission, that kind of means the same thing, a submission, a pitch. Usually it comes in an email, either from the author or from their agent. And usually it has a little synopsis of what the story is. And usually it has an attachment with some pages, some sample pages. And I just look at the pages. Usually I kind of skip everything and just look at the pages, because really the proof is in the pages. Like, that's what I like to say. Like, when you see the page, the artwork on the page, and you can read the story, you can see the characters, it usually doesn't take too long for you to decide, like, yeah, this is something that could maybe work for us, or this is definitely not right for us.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at the pages, sometimes it's like the skills of the artist. Like, sometimes people are pitching to us and maybe they're just not ready yet, or maybe their art style isn't quite right for First Second. First Second mostly publishes kids books, comics for kids. We do a little bit of comics for adults, and there's certain art styles that seem to work better for comics for kids, like kind of like Lily the Thief, that has a nice cartoony style, like kind of similar to what you might see in animation. It's like fun and young, and it's appealing, and I think that really helps the story. And adding color in this case helped it even more. So you look at the artwork. Is the artwork the right style? Is it the right quality? Then you look at the kind of story. Is this a story that we're interested in publishing? Is it a unique story? Is it and also, like, to be honest, we take into consideration the financial aspect of it. Like, is this a kind of story that is doing well in the market right now? Or like, is this the kind of story that is just flooded in the market's not doing so well? Like, we do take that into consideration, because
I'm actually interested if you can give an example of that one way or the other. Like, what genres do you think are overrepresented, I suppose, in comics right now?
It's hard to say. Like, I'm trying to, like, now that they've put it, I don't want to single out any genre and say, like, there's too much of this in comics and don't do this. I'm wary of, but I can, like, there are certain genres that are struggling more in the market. Like,
Okay.
I mean, the kids market is doing quite well. Like, I'm really so excited that so many kids, like the kids here today, are reading comics. They're checking them out from the library. Their teachers are like letting them, bringing comics to the classroom.
Yep.
All this is it's a great new world for comics. And so there's a very large readership of kids out there who love comics, and that's so good. The adult market is maybe not as healthy. It's not as healthy as the kids market right now. So, when someone pitches an adult thing, it's just you got to do your homework to make sure, like, we're not going to lose money on this book, because we don't want to lose money on the book.
Okay,
And
so it's more for the adult market you're talking about in this case
yeah.
than the kids market. Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify, because I'm interested in things like that. Sorry. At this point, do you guys have any questions about? Yes, very good. Right away, I love it. Here, ask your question.
Is there a sequel?
Oh.
Well, there's a sequel in Finland. It's a trilogy in Finland. And I mean, I'm sorry to say I can't guarantee that we'll publish the sequel. It's something we're kind of considering now, and it does, bring into question some of the things I'm talking about, like, how well is this first book doing? Like, how are the sales doing? Can we afford to publish a sequel? So that's something we're considering now. But there are 3 books in Finland, and they're being published in France. And this is kind of interesting. So, as you saw, the original book is in black and white. The color actually comes to us from France. So if the French publisher recolored it, and then we bought the color from them. So there's a lot of international parties involved in this book. So it's available in French, and it's of course available in Finnish. And it's still a question of whether it'll come out in English.
Interesting. Did you have another question?
I really love it. I'm trying to make it happen. I think it's a really special book, and a little different than some of the other, like, fantasy genre, like, graphic novels that are out there. Like, if you compare it to, I don't know, Mighty Jack, or like Giants Beware, or some of the other fantasy comics for kids. It feels it's a little different. I like it. I think older kids, adults too, can enjoy it. I mean, it's a little scary. That's something I don't always see in fantasy comics for kids. Like it's visually dark and it's a little scary, and honestly a little more violent than we usually go.
Right.
So I hope that wasn't, too scary for any of you guys. I'm kind of
Were any
curious
of
what
you
you
guys
thought.
scared too much? Well, that's silence, so that's good. You all liked the book too, right?
Yeah.
And like, well, make noise so they can actually hear it.
Yeah.
Okay, good enough. So yeah, and not too scary, so that's great. Does anybody else have any general questions about editing or being an editor? Yeah. Never mind. Okay, you can ask even if it's silly. Silly questions are fine too. No, no. All right. No, yeah. Sorry, got to do that. Yeah.
How many books do you normally get through in a year?
Like, how many do we publish?
Yeah.
About 45 a year, which I think is quite a lot. We're a pretty small team. There's now 5 on the editorial side, 3 on the design side. So I think that's a pretty small team to be putting out that many books a year. We work really hard, and we work with a bunch of editorial freelancers and design freelancers to help like keep those books coming out quickly and on schedule. Yeah.
What's your favorite book that you've done so far?
Oh, that's so hard to say. There's a book, well, I won't say it's my favorite because it's not, you shouldn't pick your favorites, but there's a series I like a lot, and if you like Lily the Thief, you might like it too. It's called The Creepy Case Files of Margot Malou. Has anybody read that one?
Yes,
It's a kid's comic about a girl who lives in this town that is populated with monsters, but they all live in secret, but the kids know about them, and so she basically brokers a peace between the monsters and the kids, because the monsters, they're not bad folks. They just want to live in peace, and but they feel threatened by the kids and the humans that are on their territory. So it's just the art is beautiful, and the story is really creative and funny. The author's name Drew Wang, and he's great. So Margot Malou, check out Margot Malou. That's a good one.
excellent. I like that.
If you publish about 25 books a year,
45.
45.
45?
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's about, let's say, one per 1.5 weeks or so.
Yeah, that sounds all right. Like less than one a week, but kind of close.
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard.
But we don't publish them like one every week.
Yeah, but also it's true that not every artist works at the same speed, and not every book gets created in the same way. So you're probably juggling a lot more than 45 books, but at any one time, right?
Yeah, cool. You have to like juggle the books that are coming out. I mean, we work in the future. So right now we're working on the books that are coming out in fall of next year and winter of 2021. So we have to work pretty far ahead.
Yeah, you're a full year in advance, pretty much.
Yeah, because really it takes us about a year from the author turning in their final work to it being published, because there's a lot of steps that have to happen after that. Like we have to put it in a layout. We have to design it. We have to design the cover. We have to copy edit it. Then we have to send it to the printer. And for a color book like Lily the Thief, usually that means it's printed in China. And then shipping it from China, that takes a long time too. And then it has to be in the warehouse early. So all those things add up to about a year of work. So yeah.
Even something simple like page numbers, I mean, have to be put in. They don't magically appear. And I suspect that there are cases where you look at a page and because of the way the art is, you don't want to put a number on that page. Those kinds of decisions.
Yeah, I bet if you look at Lily the Thief, you'll find some pages like that. For example, when the art bleeds, that's what we call it, when the art goes all the way to the edge of the paper. Usually wouldn't put a page number there. Like there's a really nice spread on page 124, 125, where, we wouldn't want to put any page numbers down here on top of the art.
Yep. And it's just an interesting set of choices that you have to make that I think are invisible to most people. I've got an online question.
Oh, and if you don't mind, like with this book, there's also an extra step. We had to get a translator.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you need,
We'll
yeah.
talk about that in a second. Let's talk about that in a second because that's a really interesting part of it. Jordan, you didn't give me the name of who asked the question though. Okay, somebody's watching online. Hello, people watching online. You can always ask questions. Do you accept submissions from, quote, just writers, or do you pair writers with other freelance artists?
We do accept submissions from just writers, and we will sometimes pair them. You know, if they bring a project to us that we really like and we want to publish it and they don't have an artist attached, then yeah, we would usually go and find one. And we would, of course, talk with the writer. We would show them samples. We'd basically get their blessing to hire an artist because that's a pretty, you know, with your story that you've written, you want the artist, you want to pick the right artist for your story. So they're very much a part of that conversation as well. I'd say fewer of our submissions come that way, where it's a writer with no artist attached. But there's a good number of them.
Yeah. Usually I find that most of the time writers find their artist and come in together as a combined pitch is often how it works.
That happens pretty often, yes.
Yeah. Cool. So let's talk about this translation process because this really fascinates me. How do you translate a comic when the language of a comic is often more informal than the language in a book? If I don't know if I phrased that right necessarily. Like
Could you repeat it? It cut out a little on my end.
Oh, so my question is I find because comics are often dialogue heavy, and dialogue tends to be conversational and colloquial. That's a big word. I'm sorry. But it's not just like literally translating, right? There's a meaning in dialogue which is different than just the straight words. So how do you do that? How does that subtlety work? Idiom, yes, very good. Idiom is a great word.
Well, usually when we get a translation, it does need a pretty thorough edit because it might sound kind of flat, like it might be accurate, but it won't sound natural. It doesn't sound natural to an American audience, and so that's the job of an editor, is to edit that translation so it sounds natural, and so giving the characters more of a sense of, you know, personality. I think this translator did a really good job, and it's good because like we hadn't worked with her before. We've never actually translated a finished book before. We kind of didn't even know where to look for a translator, but we lucked into a really good one. You know, we just edited it to give Lily the right voice. And I should mention that I worked with a freelance editor, Casey Gonzalez, who did most of that work. And yeah, so it takes, you know, it's just giving the translation a nice edit where you look at, you know, some dialogue and say, you know what, this is accurate, but it sounds awkward, or it sounds old fashioned, or it sounds, you know, just doesn't sound right, like, or doesn't sound right for this character. And then you just tweak the words where you're not tweaking the meaning, but you're just kind of changing the voice of the character. And that's just the editing of the translation.
Yeah, you probably can't, but could you give us an example of that?
Well, because Casey worked on this, I don't know if I can give a specific example for this book, but I know that like the poems in the front, well, not in the front, they're at the front of each chapter.
Right.
Like that took some tweaking to try to make them rhyme, or at least or mostly rhyme in English. So that took some creative license, but luckily Jan speaks very good English, though I know he was shy about being on camera. But
I was told he doesn't speak English at all.
No, I'm sorry. He does speak English enough to like. I'm sorry, that's not true. He does speak English well enough to communicate through email. And I did visit him in Paris this year, and we had a nice lunch, and he spoke English well enough to have a conversation.
Oh, sorry, he was shy then.
I
This
can't
would have
say.
been nice. Nobody bites. All right, it's fine.
But but we were able to, like, run everything by him if we're making any substantial changes, and he could give us a yes or a no.
Very good. I don't know. Who? Someone else has a question, right? Yes. No? Keep raising your hand. Don't do that. Fool me. Keep fooling me. Guys, no? No? Yeah, please. Here. So she can hear you.
What's your favorite book that you've published?
Well, I think someone might have asked that, but
Yeah.
let me see if I can think of another. It's it's really hard. I like them all so much. Um, I'm just looking at my shelf to see if there's just so many. It's hard to say. But I can just show you something that's just randomly on my shelf right now. That might be fun. Let's see. So we have a series called Science Comics. Do you guys know Science Comics? Have you heard of that?
Yeah, they're really good.
So we've published a lot of them, and we're publishing a lot more of them. And so this is one that's coming out next year. It's called Science Comics Crows, and I just got this in the mail. So this is called an F&G. Before the book is printed, before it's bound, it's been printed. They send us basically the pieces of the book.
All loose.
Yeah, so this is our last time to review it before they bind it. So the last chance to say, stop the presses. There's something really wrong with the book. But I really love this Science Comics Crows. I think the art is really great. So this is one of my favorite science comics. And also I just think the story is pretty cool. There's a crow and a dog, and they're just having an adventure and a conversation, and you learn a lot about crows along the way. So yeah, that's just kind of randomly on my shelf, and I thought it might be fun to show you what a book looks like before it's bound. There's these things called signatures, which are these. You could even probably, if you look at the binding of the book, you might see there's all these little like folded things of paper glued together. That's a signature, and all those signatures are glued or are sewn into the binding, and then the cover is put on it. So this is what a book looks like before it's actually bound.
I think Lily the Thief is 9 signatures, right?
9?
Oh well, you know what?
I just
I could. It might be. So a signature is 16 pages. So I'm getting my. I think it might be a little more because it looks like that's only 144 pages. But so yeah. So maybe there's more signatures here, or there's signatures within signatures. I'm not sure.
So that's an interesting thing that I think that happens with graphic novels that it doesn't happen with periodical comics as much. But because authors are writing these big stories that they don't necessarily know where it's going to. I mean, some people are really plotting it, meticulous, and they know exactly how many pages it's going to be. But I find a lot of people, they're drawing until they stop drawing. So when you get a book that comes in at 146 pages, and you're like, well, that's not divisible by 16.
Oh.
What happens then?
Well, that's a good question, because that happened with Lily the Thief. Like when it was turned in, it wasn't in divisions of 16. So if you've probably seen in the back, we have these extra sketches. Those extras are there to like fill up those pages to bring it to a multiple of 16. So that's one of the reasons sometimes you see extra bonus material in the back of the book. Sometimes that was always the plan, like they just wanted to publish that material, but sometimes they have to fill space to meet that signature. And the 16-page signature, that's something we do at First Second. Some printers can do an 8-page signature, but there's some sort of signature that they need to fall in.
Sure. Yes, please. Adults asking questions are fine.
We're big fans of the Science Comics series,
Ooh,
so it's
good.
exciting to see an upcoming title. I'm wondering, with a series like that, where they cover all different kinds of topics, can you talk a little bit about how you make your topic selections and whether those come in via the same process or whether there's a different sort of editorial process to solicit things on a particular type of topic.
Well, I hate to keep bringing up like finance and money, but like, if I'm being honest, it is part of the calculation. So we usually have, a list of topics that we'd really like to cover, and then we'll talk to our sales team who help us like get our books into bookstores. So we'll have someone on our sales team who like helps us get the books on Amazon, or ones that help get them in Barnes and Noble, or one that works with independent, or one that works with like Target and retail places like that. And they'll give us feedback. Also we talk to our library team, our school and library team, and they help us know which topics teachers and librarians are really looking for. For example, some feedback we get is, there are just so many books on this topic. We don't need another book on this topic. It's just overdone. Or on the opposite end, there's just not a lot of books on this topic. We should do one. For example, it seems like the engineering topics don't get as much coverage compared to like the biology topics. Like there's a lot of books about animals, but maybe less books about, robots or flying machines or rockets and skyscrapers. And we've done books or are doing books on all those topics. So yeah, it's like, and also part of the conversation is who can we get to make these books? Sometimes we have an author, for example, one of our authors, John Chad, he's done a book on volcanoes and a book on the solar system, and he's great. He loves science, and he has an interest in chemistry. So we thought, well, let's do a book that's chemistry focused with him. So we're planning to do another book that's about the periodic table with him. So sometimes it depends on what authors you have, what authors you can find, but also what's popular and what might sell better than other topics.
I wonder how you keep things straight. Because I imagine that you're looking at manuscripts at different parts of the process on a regular basis. Some authors are sending you complete works, but others are near complete works, and others are probably sending you things in chunks at a time. And when you're dealing with books that, some books can take up to 2 years probably, or 3 years to gestate. How do you as an editor keep it straight?
It's really hard. It's just a lot of juggling. It's just kind of the job. There's so many books that we're publishing, and we have so many books that are in the works, and we need to check in with our authors and see how the book's coming along. Are they on schedule, or they need a little more time? And then like if they need more time, we have to adjust our schedule. So it's we keep some spreadsheets. It's not a fun answer, but like spreadsheets help us keep track of all of it. Yeah, just and also just being very schedule, or very focused on our publishing schedule. So like right now we're really looking towards fall 20 and winter 21. We've pretty much finished all the books for spring 20. Now, so we're like the high priority is like doing the finishing touches on the books that are going to publish in fall of next year right now. And then next would be winter of 21. So we're always just looking to what's the next step to get the books published that are coming out next. So it's kind of like trying to do two things at once, like work on the thing that's coming up right now that needs to be done so it'll be print on time, and then the bigger picture, like looking at the things that are in progress and are going to be done in a couple of years.
Sure.
And it is hard to switch gears.
Yeah, I was wondering too, just sort of creatively, right? If you're, because what you can think about a work will change with your mood and the time, and so perhaps the advice you're giving, or is differs from time to time over the course of a manuscript. Is that true, or am I being silly there? Am I overthinking?
I mean, what kind of advice do you mean?
Oh, just story flow
Mm.
or tone or oh, you're going in this direction. Oh, this isn't working as well as we thought. I don't know. Is
Mm.
does that happen?
I'm sorry. I'm not sure I understand the question. Could you ask it again?
I'll come back because she's got a question.
Mm.
Where's the author?
Oh,
Where
where's the author?
Yeah.
Oh, he lives in Finland.
for this book?
Oh, yeah, for this book.
Yeah. In general, though,
Um,
the author can be anywhere in the whole world. That's the neat thing about the modern world.
I'm
is-
sorry, it's cutting out. I can't
Oh.
hear.
Are we? Everything looks okay on our side. Yeah. Is that what your question was? Is just this book or? Okay. Yeah.
At the moment.
Yeah. He's in Finland. That's where he is. Did anybody else? Because I can't see so much behind me. Are you guys any more questions? No. Okay. So I guess my question was about when you're doing a creative process over a number of months or a year. It's one thing for the creator, right? Because that's all the creator's doing. They're thinking about one thing the whole time. But as an editor, because you're working on different things throughout that year, and your tastes and your thoughts and things change over the course of the year, is that ever a challenge?
In terms of like giving them editorial feedback, like, well, I guess I feel like I want to make the book the best thing it can be, and but I don't. Once I've acquired a book, usually I'm kind of trusting the author's vision for the most part, so that I don't want to like make big changes to their concept and their story. I'm just trying to fine tune it to make it the best it can be, and so I try to limit the feedback I'm going to give that's going to cause them to rework their book, their vision, or their artwork in a major way. Because I feel like, one, that's a lot of labor for them, and drawing a book in the first place is a lot of hard work. It's so, when you think about comics, there are a lot of pictures on a page, and then there's just a lot of pages in a graphic novel. So it's just a lot of work. So I don't want to put too much hardship on the creator to make them sort of course correct in a major way, unless there's really a very important reason to do that.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that does make sense. Yeah, I was, but yeah, that's a great answer. Adult questions? No? You guys are set? I think we've run out of questions.
Okay.
That's pretty good. Well, at least we know a little bit more about what an editor does. Do you guys feel like you understand what an editor does now? Okay, cool. Neat. All right. Plug us some things. Obviously, you just plugged the science comics. What else you got coming up that you think the kids should watch out for?
Let's see. Well, there's this series. Let's see if I can find it, called Maker Comics. I don't know if you guys have heard of that.
Yep. We like Maker Comics.
Oh, good. Like here's an example. Create a costume. So I mentioned science comics. Maker Comics is kind of like, maybe not the sister series, but the cousin series of science comics, where it's nonfiction. It's teaching you something, but in this case, it's teaching you how to do something, like how to create a costume or how to grow a garden. I did get an F&G of Grow a Garden. Again, F&G, it stands for Folded and Gathered. That's the book, the guts of the book before it's been bound. So we're doing books on car repair. Well, we've already done car repair, baking, drawing comics, making costumes. The gardening book is coming out early next year. We're doing a book on robots, and we have some new titles coming up as well. So I'm excited about that, because I'm the editor of that series, and I work really hard on those books. Let's see. I'm trying to just grab stuff that's also it's on my shelf right here. Um,
It's okay if you don't have anything. I'm just
Oh, this is one I'm really excited. It's gonna be so good, guys. It's young adult, so it's a little older, but it's called Dragon Hoops. It's a Gene Luen Yang. You might know him. He's one of our biggest sellers as far like one of our most prestigious authors. American Born Chinese was a book that we published many years ago, and it's still one of our biggest successes. So this is Gene's new book that's all by him is his new solo title because he did Secret Coders for a while with Mike Holmes, but it's been a while since we've had a book by Gene where he did the story and the art, and it's really good. It's about basketball. It's about a basketball team at this high school where he was a teacher, and he's not really a sports guy. He never really got sports. But as you learn more about this team and the story behind the players and the coach and the real life drama involved in being on this sports team, he said, "Oh, there's a story here," and he just followed the story to its end. So it's great. It's going to be big.
yeah, it's a good book. I actually I've got one of the advanced copies and I've read it myself. So I second that recommendation. That actually brings up a good point, I think, and maybe we can close on this question because this is maybe an interesting answer. What's the difference in editing between doing a fiction book and a nonfiction book?
There's a lot of differences. This might just be my feeling, but I think a lot of editors would agree. Nonfiction is harder in a lot of ways because you have to make sure it's accurate in a way that you don't have to in fiction. In fiction, there's a lot you can make up, and it's you can just use your imagination, and it's no problem. But with science comics, science has to be accurate, so the author has to do the work to get that right, and the editor has to be thorough to flag anything that might be incorrect, but also anything that might be confusing, because that's especially with the maker books, because they're instructions. Like there's a lot of work to make sure those instructions are really clear and they won't be confusing. And so yeah, it takes a lot more time to edit nonfiction, because you got to make sure that it's correct and that it's clear, that you're like taking the time to, like, if we're introducing new words that the reader won't know, that we define those words. And we need to hire fact checkers to make sure to do a double check that things are correct. And you don't have to do that with fiction. So that's one way they're different.
Yeah, and they have to be entertaining, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise the kid's not going to put it down if it's boring.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's still got to be entertaining at the same time.
Yeah, that part's kind of the same from fiction to nonfiction. It still has to, have characters that are, relatable and a story that's interesting, and it has to be have nice pacing and all those things.
Yep. Very good. Well, that's interesting. And which do you enjoy editing more?
Oh, I don't know. I like them both a lot. I do like working on nonfiction, and I do a lot of it. We also have a new series that's coming out that's for adults that's called World Citizen Comics, and it's it teaches civics and democracy, and I like those books a lot, but they're hard and they take a lot of time. So sometimes I like fiction because it just feels like a little easier for me.
Interesting. I like that answer. Well, Robyn, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us and helping us understand what an editor does and how things work. Our book was Lily the Thief, and I thoroughly recommend that anybody out there watching this, which I know there's lots of you, go out and pick up a copy of this. It's from First Second, but your local comic shop or your local bookstore should be able to get it. And it's a great book. A lot of fun, and hopefully we'll get 2 more volumes out of it. That
I hope so.
Exist. That sounds great. Next month's book is The Courageous Princess by Rod Espinoza. Rod is going to be here on January 19th. Rod is coming all the way from the Philippines.
Whoa.
Just to come over here and talk to us about comics and making comics, which I think is really cool because that's a really, really, really long way to travel. I mean, he has family here too, but he's coming out to see his family because we invited him in to do this. So that I hope we get everybody here to come out and people at home watching that one. I want to thank everybody for coming out today. The kids coming out, especially on a cold day like this. And that was the club for the month. And I want to thank everybody. Thank you again, Robyn.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for reading it, guys. I'm glad you liked it.
Very good. See you next month.
Bye.
And we're out. Yay! Yay!